to start recording. The first time I did this, it cut off my introduction.
Uh-oh.
So, all right, here we
All
go.
right, now we go.
Okay, so hello everybody. Welcome to the Low Budget Interview Show. I am your host Eric Smith, and today I have with me two very special guests. Hopefully, I'll pronounce this correctly. Meg Hafdahl and Kelly Florence. Hello.
Hi.
Okay, did I say that Hafdahl?
No, but that's okay. It
Well,
really doesn't matter.
What is the?
Well, it's Hafdahl, but a lot of people say Hafdahl or Hafdahl, like you said, and it's totally cool. I don't take offense. Like, it's not like Kelly Florence where it's like really obvious.
Or Eric Smith, which is pretty easy. Okay, well, I want you to introduce yourselves to any viewers, but I thought what we would do here, I was looking at your books. Oh, and I didn't even say why you're here. Um, Mainly because you are the co-authors of, I'll hold these up, The Science of Monsters, The Science of Women in Horror, and The Science of Stephen King, which I believe is my autographed copy.
Woo!
But I noticed when I was looking at these that Meg, your author bio on the back changed once, and Kelly's, yours is different on all three. So, to hopefully this won't put you on the spot. To introduce yourselves to the audience, we'll start with, I don't know, we'll start with Kelly. If you had to write a new author bio right now to introduce yourself, what would it say?
Sorry, I had to disconnect some Bluetooth. Somebody's listening to Bluetooth through my phone, so I had to disconnect. That's why I disappeared for a second. But can you repeat, what should I say about myself?
Okay, well, I just said if you were writing a brand new author bio right now to introduce yourself, what would it say?
Kelly Florence, co-author of 5 books with Meg Hafdahl, co-host of Horror Rewind podcast, and Cobra Kai superfan. Is a horror maniac and horror lover since birth, basically.
All right, and Meg?
That's hard to follow. Meg Hafdahl, queen of horror, alongside Kelly Florence. Yes, we have the three books you mentioned, then we have 2 more books coming out. And I also write fiction, so I'm the author of the Twisted Reverie short story series, as well as the Willoughby Chronicles novel series. I have another novel coming out this year, and you might find my short stories in anthologies, and also on the Wicked Library and the Lift are audio plays that I write for as well. So I basically like to cover all my bases when it comes to horror, nonfiction, fiction, all of
it. Great. Well, thank you. Now, again, your bios say you both live in Minnesota. Are you in the same town?
Unfortunately not. We used to live near each other, but we've never lived in the same town until, just briefly we lived together for less than a year. We were roommates, but we live 3.5 hours away, so that's tough.
Now, how did you get together as partners, creative partners? Let's put it that way.
Well, we've been friends for about 20 years, and we had started out 20 years ago writing high school plays together and directing high school plays, which was really fun. And then, we both kind of went our own ways career-wise. We both became moms and we got busy. And then it kind of all came back together. We started to do a podcast together called Horror Rewind because we wanted to kind of get back into what we kind of liked about each other at first, which is we both loved horror and talking about horror. So we started there, and then pretty soon we were writing books together, and it's just been really cool to do it with my best friend. It's pretty neat.
It's like living the dream, because I get to call or text Meg and say, hey, have you written about like this vampire condition? She's like, no, you take that. Like, those are the conversations we have now. And it's like, if we had told ourselves 20 years ago we would get to research Stephen King and interview these amazing people, we would never have believed it.
Yeah, it's amazing when you get to do this sort of thing, your passion, which is kind of why I do the YouTube thing, because I just want to talk about books, and it's mainly horror. I'd say probably 80% horror, novels that I talk about on there, and then there's some science fiction and other mysteries and things thrown in. But to just be able to put it out there and talk about the stuff you love
It's
is a
pretty
lot of
fun.
fun. Now, speaking of Horror Rewind, did one of you come up with that idea, or did you both just say, "Hey, let's do a podcast"?
We were driving down to Walker Stalker in Chicago, which was a Walking Dead convention. Meg was going to sell her books, and I was selling some horror crafts that I had made. And I think Meg said, maybe we should do a podcast. And so then over that weekend of sitting at a table and meeting horror fans, we're like, yes. And I think we should base it on our childhood love of horror movies and rewatch those movies that opened the door to the genre for us. And then we've expanded it to include books and current movies and TV shows. And it's just been a wonderful journey of realizing and rekindling that love of horror and horror novels, and yet rediscovering and finding new things too.
Did you find, were there any particular hurdles in starting a podcast?
I always say, like, Kelly is like the technical woman, and she is so good about that stuff. Like, I'm still to this day like texting her like, I don't know how to do this Google Doc thing or whatever, and Kelly knows it all. So she is so good about teaching herself too. And starting a podcast, it's not easy. And I mean, Kelly can tell you what she went through, but it takes a lot of technical know-how and like actually sticking with it. And Kelly does a great job of that. And like, I always joke, I just show up to Horror Rewind and make jokes and leave, and Kelly does all the hard work.
Well, and I told Meg when I started teaching myself how to do this, I'm like, oh, this is why all those people are like, I should have a podcast, and then they don't. It's because, oh, there's a lot of technical stuff involved in a lot of, like you said, hurdles to jump, that it's like, okay, people, if you're not going to, follow through, then it's not going to happen.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, I almost made a horrible mistake getting ready for this. I listened to my podcasts at work off my phone on Google Podcast. And for some reason on my phone, the last episode of Horror Rewind that's listed is Twilight Zone episode 3, which is from initially I just saw April, and I thought, oh, maybe they've stopped doing it because of COVID, something, there was some reason. And then I noticed it was April 2019. And I said, oh, that can't be from COVID. So I Googled and found that obviously you've been doing it for all this time. So I'm way behind. What's new with Horror Rewind? Any changes for the past 2 years?
Yeah. And so we're coming up on our almost 3-year anniversary of the podcast, and we haven't missed a week, which I think is pretty incredible. We have had different co-hosts, though, since Meg and I can't get together as often, I know we can record online, but a lot of times my husband will step in and record an episode with me. And now Meg does her book corners every week if we can't record together. So she's always talking about new or recent horror fiction. And so that's, I would say, how it's evolved since we began. When we started, for 2+ years straight, it was just she and I every episode, but we've had to make some changes because of COVID, but we haven't missed a week.
Well, I definitely have to catch up, and I did look at some of the newer stuff, and for me, especially with a podcast like yours, I'm going to skip a lot of episodes simply because it's things I haven't seen. Like your most recent was now I can't think of the name of it. The one with Carey Mulligan.
Yeah, Promising Young Woman.
Right.
And that's what we say at the top of every episode too. We kind of give our thoughts on the movie, whether it's recent or older, and say, okay, now we're going to get into spoilers. If you haven't seen it, stop listening and listen after you've watched it.
Yeah, I absolutely want to see that movie. It looks so good.
No spoilers. We gave it a 10 out of 10. So
that's good to hear. And I noticed relatively recently, like you talked about Clown in a Cornfield.
Uh-huh, yep. I
which
did.
loved that book.
That was a great slasher. Like, I loved it.
So definitely, I'm gonna have to figure out how to listen or download to my phone from someplace other than Google Podcasts.
Okay.
I don't know why it's every other
Yeah.
podcast I listen to, it shows me when there's new episodes.
Well,
And
Kelly's the technical girl, so she'll help you.
I'll get on it. I'm gonna fix it for you.
um, so with the science books, how did this come about?
Well, we knew that we wanted to approach what we love, which is horror films, and we knew we wanted to do it in a new way. There are a lot of books out there about horror films, and science is really a way for Kelly and I to learn because we both do not have science backgrounds. My background's in literature, her background's in communication and theater. And so we like the idea. We love research. Like, we're those nerds who we really like, doing the research. And so we wanted to learn things. And science has been a great way for us to do it. And also, it allows us to write a book that's accessible. We're not writing this for people who, are steeped in scientific knowledge. We're writing this for people like us who aren't. But love doing the connection between that and the horror movie. And I think for that reason, it just clicked very well for both of us.
Well, I'm a big fan of pop culture mixed with science and things like that. There's a couple of publishers that do pop culture and philosophy, which
That's
was my
cool.
major in school, and I have a ton of those. And then there are I have a bunch of science and science and books, but those are usually science and Star Trek or science and superheroes. And I was
Sure.
very excited to see horror in this. I actually stumbled across Science and the Women of Horror first at Barnes and Noble, and I grabbed that and read it. And a few weeks later, I saw the Monsters, and of course grabbed that, and then was right there at the beginning when Stephen King was coming out. And as I said, I've got one from Meg. So how do you divide up the work?
It's evolved. When we started, we were pretty evenly working on each chapter together, and then we realized, what, let's divide up by sections, so that way we know, like, Meg is going to write all about hysteria, for example, in the Women of Horror, and I'm going to write all about revenge. That way we could just very clearly decide, how the path would go through those 3 chapters in each section. And then we, of course, go through together and rewrite or write and edit and interview together. And it's just been a really good working process because it's 50-50.
Yeah, and also another aspect is, like, for Stephen King, for example, there were things that, like, we knew was, like, my thing or her thing. Like, she's an 11/22/63 girl. Like, that was gonna be her chapter, So there are things like that where it's like it's really obvious who's gonna take it. And so that's fun too, because we both understand each other and know, like, okay, yeah. Because for instance, like, I'm kind of the true crime serial killer girl, and I loved writing about Ed Gein and everything. That's my deal, and so we balance each other out well.
Well, taking the first two, Science of Monsters, Science of Women in Horror, where it's divided up into categories, I suppose. Did you choose the categories first and then find movies that fit? Or did you have movies in mind and find a category that would go with them, or some other?
We definitely figured out the categories first, especially with monsters. We were like, okay, what are the monsters? And then we figured out the movies. With Women in Horror, we went with, let's figure out the tropes and see what movies fit these tropes. Stephen King, of course, was chronological, and serial killers, now we are doing also different types of serial killers for our next book. So it's all, based on the things we come up with ahead of time, and then we find who fits that category or what movie. Or book.
Well, I had a great coincidence with women in horror because right after I finished that, I read True Crime
Oh
by
yeah.
Samantha. I don't want to mangle her
Holzman.
last. Yeah, and uh, I don't even know if I was halfway through it when I realized I was like, wait a minute, I read about this babysitter killer thing
Ah,
in Women of Horror, and then I said, wait, and I think there's an interview with her in here.
yes.
And I went back and I grabbed Science of Women in Horror and I reread that part. And then I went back to reading True Crime, which is a great book, of course. Excuse me. So with Stephen King, again, was it? I suppose in this case, how tough was it to pick which stories and books you were going to talk about?
You know, there are ones that are like obvious where it's like, okay, we knew that you're not going to write a book without talking about it or The Shining or, certain ones like that. But there are also ones that, like, for instance, Lacey's story is one of my favorites, but it's kind of not necessarily one of his most, revered or well known. So because it was, again, a personal favorite of mine, then I stuck it in there. But it's definitely hard when he's so prolific. And I say all the time, and I got a lot of messages from people like, why didn't you talk about this book or this story? And I'm sure we could write a whole other book about his books and work.
And I know too, like we had covered The Shining and Carrie in our monsters book, or even our women book, but then we just shifted the lens and the approach, and it's like, okay, but let's look at it at other scientific points of view with Carrie. And I really love that because in our first book we talk about the telepathy and that side of the science, and this time it was like, okay, wait, how is this path, how did he get inspired to write it, and the true things that inspired him and the science behind those things. And so that's what I think is so fun. Like Meg said, we're research nerds, and so we can all of a sudden just shift your focus and look at it from a different point of view.
So was there ever a question about using, say, Carrie twice? Did you ever say, well, maybe we shouldn't? We already covered that.
We did, and then we were like, well, maybe we shouldn't. And then I said, you know what? We can't not talk about Carrie. We can't leave it out because it was the first, and we hadn't talked about, it was in the garbage and Tabitha retrieved it. Like that, those were important stories to tell about his career, and that's what we loved about this book too, about like the biographical journey of this author. It was so fun to go in and see what was happening in the world, what was happening in his life at the time, and how did that connect to the real science and then these stories or these movies.
I have to admit, there's a huge gap in my Stephen King reading. After Misery, I just sort of fell off and didn't come back until Under the Dome. So there's huge gap.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff I haven't read. But I didn't skip anything in the book. And some of it didn't spot. Oh, I need to pick that up and read it sooner than later.
Good.
I am loving his newer stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I have to admit, I think right now Holly Gibney is my favorite character.
Oh, we love her too.
Which
Yeah.
I read The Outsider and just fell in love with her. Immediately went and bought the Mercedes trilogy. I don't know if that's what it's actually called, but just had to have.
Oh,
Yeah.
had to have more.
With her.
And then there's a story in the latest book of his that she's
It bleeds.
Yeah. So yeah, she's great. I think it's kind of fun to see in his older age some of the characters he's coming up with, and I think he's just especially with female characters, he's doing a better job of just really getting in there deep and just creating some really awesome characters. So as Stephen King does.
So what's your favorite Stephen King story, each of you, or book?
Kelly?
I'm going to have to say currently 11/22/63. I was in ninth grade when I became obsessed with the JFK assassination, and I was the kid who went to the public library and borrowed the Warren Commission, and I read it cover to cover, and I was recreating, like I was that Charlie Day meme, like with the red strings with like all the
Right.
things, telling high school friends like, no, but the magic bullet couldn't have done this, and so then when this novel came out, I was like, wait, Stephen King, who I love, and this obsession of mine from ninth grade coming together. So it still holds a very special place in my heart. But that being said, I also love the Dark Tower series.
And for me, I like his like ensemble book. So my favorite right now is Needful Things. I love that book. I love his sort of treatment of rural Gothic small town. That's a big thing for me that I love. So I have to go with Needful Things on that.
All right. Well, this is going to be my night for confessions, I guess. Well, first of all, like Carrie, I read for the first time a couple of years ago, and The Stand I read for the first time last year.
Wow!
Right.
Before
For some reason, in March of last year, I thought The Stand would be appropriate to read, and I've been trying to find the old copies. So, like my copy of The Stand is the one with the face and the crow superimposed. So it's not the unabridged edition.
Yeah.
I guess I read the short version. And I haven't read 11. See, 11. What is it?
2263.
Never get the numbers right. I have not read that. I haven't read Needful Things.
All right. Well,
and
we expect book reports.
My biggest confession, I don't know. I read Pet Sematary decades ago, and for decades I've been telling people it is the second most boring book I have ever read.
Oh.
Second only to Jane Eyre.
No, Meg.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But I reread.
Isn't it nice that we're all different? That's what my mom taught me. That's what I say to my kids. Isn't it nice?
But I reread Pet Sematary last year, and I absolutely loved it. I couldn't put it down.
Sometimes it matters where you are in your life.
Exactly. That's what I say. That's happened a few times where I've read a book and not liked it, come back to it later and loved it. Although the first Dean Koontz book I ever read, I hated. I reread it years later, still hated it.
Okay, but what about, does this mean you're going to reread Jane Eyre then?
Maybe I will. Although I do have, at last count, I had about 700 unread books. So,
okay. Oh my God. What's another?
Including a lot of Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, we got off on that tangent, and I forgot what my next question was. How do you go about getting your interview subjects when it's not like a husband or a father? Do you have a list of people? How does that work?
Well, it depends. Like for women in horror, it was a lot of filmmakers and women in film. So we some of them we contacted just outright. And some of them, we knew people in kind of the industry, and we would kind of, say, hey, could you introduce us to this person? Or, can we get this person's email? We want to ask them. So sometimes it takes those kind of, you have to navigate through several people. And with a lot of the scientists, oftentimes we just, straight up tell them this is what we're doing. And, are you interested? And I know for the Stephen King one, I especially looked for Stephen King fans who were scientists, because I wanted them to kind of understand what we were doing. And I thought it would kind of help them then talk about Stephen King, at the same time. So.
And it's ironic because I went the opposite direction of Meg for the Stephen King book specifically. I reached out to people sort of blindly, and most people were very willing to participate. But I did get one response, and I won't name names, but she said, "Give Mr. King my best, but I'm not a fan, and I refuse to participate in your book." So it's like, okay.
Wow.
So I mean,
Well, I do.
her.
I did love seeing. I'm cheating now. I'm looking. I did love I don't remember the name, but the person you interviewed for 11/22/63. Um, my the way I recall the interview is essentially he started every answer with, "Well, time travel's not possible, but."
I know. And it was reminiscent of when Meg did her interview with the doctor from the Mayo Clinic about dissociative identity disorder in the Monsters book. Like, she was super excited to talk about it, and he's like, "Nope, it doesn't exist." And I was like, oh wait, what? Yeah, so Dr. James Hedberg was like, "Nope, time travel's not possible." So, and I was like, wow, you're shutting this down, but I love this story.
Well, it was a great interview. I found that funny.
Yeah, it doesn't
Um,
go the way you think.
excuse me. It's the one reason I wish I could edit is when I have to do something like that. So your next book is Science of Serial Killers. And now is this still movie based?
Yeah, so this is I think our biggest challenge to date, I have to say. We knew that we wanted to go the true crime route, but we also wanted to bring in the movie element and the science. So that became a balancing act of how do we talk about all three things, do it respectfully, because true crime is sort of bringing in, a lot of content that we hadn't necessarily talked about in length before. And so this, I think, took a lot of more like pre-planning than the other books, because we really wanted to be on the same page as like how we were going to mix all three of those things into one short chapter. And I think we're doing a good job, and I'm proud of the mix that we're doing, but it definitely has been a challenge.
And I think too, unlike the other books, I mean, there's always disturbing things in horror movies, of course, and in science. But this true crime and serial killer book, I've had to step away a lot of times from research and reading about things, because it's real people 100% of the time, and it's not just in theory if this horror villain did this. It's like this actually happened, and so we do base a lot of our chapters on either horror movies featuring serial killers or inspired by them, TV shows, and then some of the chapters are based on books.
Oh, okay. Well, I do think it's a good sign for us as people, as human beings, that we can read or watch fiction that's graphic and horrible, and we can enjoy it, but we can still, when we step into the real world, it still affects us.
Yeah.
And even something real world that's half as graphic as something we might enjoy in fiction is just it's painful.
Yeah, and I think for us too, something that was important, when we're doing Science of Monsters, we are talking about the mythos of, Freddy and Jason and people like that. And we didn't want the book to feel like we were saying that Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer deserved that sort of mythos, or that they are monsters in that same vein. We wanted to sort of diminish them and talk about them as more from like a scientific, we're kind of poking them and looking into the science behind them. We didn't want them to feel like, again, there's like this mythos of Leatherface. It's two different things, so that for us was really important, because we didn't want to feel like we were putting any of them on a pedestal.
Right. And I texted Meg one morning in my writing, and I was like, it's really hard not end every chapter by saying, in conclusion, this guy was an asshole. That's the truth. I found a way like to honor the victims and delve into the actual science behind so many things that they have in common, which is astounding. So I can't wait for people to read it.
Oh, I can't wait to read it. And I may have this wrong. Did you say on Twitter October is the release?
Yep.
Excuse me. Now, can you tell us what the next one is? Any
Yes,
chance we can get that?
it's going to be October of 2022, and it's the Science of Witchcraft.
Oh,
And so
nice.
about the history of witchcraft in literature and lore and um, different cultures and movies and television shows. And we're bringing theater and other things into this one. It's going to be our best one yet.
Oh,
I'm excited because I feel like witchcraft and the occult or whatever, I feel like I don't know a lot about it. So I'm excited to like learn a lot and just geek out over a bunch of stuff. So it's gonna be fun.
now is there? Have you started work on this one?
Just some pre-planning. We're finishing up serial killers currently, and so we've done some brainstorming, and we have some sections and chapters tentatively scheduled. But the fun thing about this is what movies and books are going to come out before we have to have this not book due that we can write about. We don't even know yet. That's really exciting.
And the nice thing with our wonderful editor at Skyhorse is she's very good about being flexible and like we'll often say, okay, when we're talking about it and we're signing the contract, we'll say these are what we're going to talk about. But then often like, we'll start rating something and be like, no, I want to talk about this movie or this person. And she's been very flexible about that, which is really nice. So it's kind of fun because it becomes kind of a discovery thing where like, for instance, I kind of went on this whole tangent and I ended up finding the movie Rope, the Alfred Hitchcock film. And, we hadn't thought about that or talked about it. And it ended up just being a really cool chapter, I think. So it's kind of fun that we discover as we go.
Are you planning on keeping the series going after that one? I mean, not asking for specifics, but
we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, we may have come up with 12 other ideas just in the past 10 days because I have this idea. So we're going to rein it in and see what happens.
See if we again don't want to put you on the spot. Can either or both of you say the most interesting or surprising thing you learned while researching these three?
It's so it's so tough because it's like I'll be honest, I'm like so steeped in serial killers right now. Like that's the only thing I can think of. It's like,
That's
yeah, we
exactly
wrote
where
3
my
books
mind
before.
went too.
Yeah, it's like, okay, serial killers. No. I really liked the biography aspect of the Stephen King book. And learning about how this sort of random guy unmasked Richard Bachman and figured out that it was Stephen King. I love kind of that story and how he was going to try to blackmail him. And Stephen King wouldn't let him and stuff. So I really like that. And I thought that was kind of a neat story that I really didn't know the background to. How about you, Kelly?
I think looking back, writing our women in horror, a Science of Women in Horror book, it was like our feminist manifesto, and we didn't realize how many things poured out of us and how passionate we were about the subject. I mean, we knew, but until we went through that process, and then we sat down and we edited get together. It was, I think, July, and we're like, wow, we love this book. And I mean, to this day, I'm really proud of that book.
Well, it's fantastic. Excuse me. As I said, I love all three of them, and I like that there's so many subjects that are covered.
Yeah.
And excuse me, sorry, I've got dry air here.
Oh.
Getting a little choked up, but yeah. So I love that it covers so many different subjects, and you're using horror as the springboard to talk about just so many different things.
Right.
All right. Once again, lost my train of thought. I'm gonna take a drink of water. Talk amongst yourselves.
All right.
So I'm going to show you my mug. It's a Cobra Kai mug. It's Johnny Lawrence.
I have not watched Cobra Kai yet.
Oh my gosh, you got to.
I'm obsessed.
I find any time I have a choice between reading and watching something, I always choose reading.
Well, that's good. That's
so there are
good.
tons of shows and movies that I would love to see, and I just don't
I know.
Got around to watching them.
There's only so much time in the day, right?
And I just watched The Invitation for the first time.
Oh, that's a good one.
What, a couple of years old, right?
Yeah, that's all right. Hey, you're getting there.
So Meg, you have a trilogy,
Yes.
and that's I have the titles of two of them on the back of one of this book. I don't,
Yeah,
and the
it's
third
okay.
one just came out relatively recently, correct?
Yeah, so it's called the Willoughby Chronicles, but the first one's called Her Dark Inheritance. The second one is Daughters of Darkness, and the third one is The Darkest Hunger. And that one just came out in October, but it's a series, and it's centered around the same characters in the same little small town in Minnesota. It's female-driven horror. There's supernatural or psychological horror. I'm really proud of it. It was bittersweet to be done because there's obviously that feeling of like, okay, I'm ready to move on to a new story with new characters after 3 books, but it also kind of felt sad leaving them behind. So I'm very proud of it, and I love hearing when people enjoy it. So.
And I have to say, obviously the first book is amazing. The second book is wonderful, but the conclusion to the trilogy, you can tell Meg has come into her own, and it is mind-blowingly good. Like, it's so, the conclusion is your best writing to date, Meg. So there you go.
Thank you.
Now, have you put this to rest? Is there any? Are you going to revisit maybe?
Oh, I'm sure I'll be back. I wrote a short story series as well, and the whole second book are all short stories that take place in that town as well. So Willoughby has done well for me, and I like being there. So I'm sure I'll be back in some form.
But the fun thing is that she's got a third short story collection coming out the same time Serial Killers does, and a new novel.
Yeah.
A new novel series, right? So she signed on with another publisher, and we get a new fiction book. So she's. You said horror queen in your biography, Meg, and it's true.
Thank you.
Can you tell us about the new novel?
Sure. I don't want to say too much, but it is about a woman who is very steeped and obsessed with true crime, and she ends up in the same fields where Ed Gein's house was, and she ends up meeting a very interesting person there. And that's all I can say right now. But I think people will enjoy it, and I still have a lot of work to do on it, but I have a lot of red marks that my editor gave me that I have to fix. But I'm very excited about it, and like Kelly said, I have a short story collection coming out, and it's all antique tales, so it's all horror stories that take place kind of pre-World War II. And so that's been really fun too. So I'm just kind of all over the map right now.
Right. So Kelly, again, I'm looking at your bio, and I have to say, trying to look up both of you online to find out things. I'm not a internet expert by any means. I found Meg's website, but I didn't find anything for Kelly.
No, I don't have my own website. I just the Horror Rewind.
And then, excuse me, I was.
What are you about to reveal? What did you find?
No, I thought I was going to kind of call you a ghost, because I'm like, she doesn't have a website. I never see her posting on Twitter. I see Meg posting. I don't see and then I looked and I wasn't following you.
Oh.
And I don't know why, because as soon as I bought Women in Horror, I thought I had followed both of you.
Oh.
And but apparently, so I rectified that and saw that she does tweet. But your bio on Women in Horror mentions Gothic gifts.
Yes, I was talking about that when we did our Walker Stalker Con. I used to make horror crafts, and then when we started writing our books, I'm like, you know what? I don't have time for this anymore. And so that hobby is done. It's dead and buried. But I teach full time. I'm a communication professor, and I love teaching and talking about communication. I also have a communication podcast, and um, I'm also the fun thing is I'm bringing in some sort of horror aspect into communication teaching, because I can say, hey, look at this scene, not anything gory or problematic, but look at the communication in this scene, and the students connect to it more than something esoteric, for example.
Okay, well, obviously you both are very busy. If you have free time, what outside of horror, what do you any hobbies or other interests outside of the work and the horror
Well,
besides Cobra Kai?
Yeah. Kelly is Cobra Kai. I watched it too. I do like watching, and Kelly and I, like, it's funny when we get together too, because like we either watch horror or we watch like romance. Yeah. So we're both extremes. So we like that stuff too. But I love to read. I read a lot, but most of that's horror, not all of it. But and Kelly's a really good cook. That's one thing she's good at.
I've taken up that hobby during quarantine because you can't concentrate on anything else or worry about anything else while you're doing these very extreme recipes. So yeah, that's definitely a hobby of mine, is cooking. And then I'm a dancer and theater person by trade, and former dance teacher. And so I know I can't go out dancing now, but I'll have a dance party at home.
Now, this is a question that I always find it difficult to answer. We'll see how you two do. What is your favorite horror movie?
You know, I have to go with The Shining.
Wait, Meg, should
so much.
Should we do it?
We each
nice.
Have a great
Very nice.
Hold hands.
Yeah, they hold hands if I get up on my tiptoes. Yeah, no, The Shining, I love it. And I mean, I love so many horror movies, obviously, but that one just stands above and beyond. I do. What about you, Kelly?
And I won't repeat you, but I love The Shining, obviously, but I'm a big Bruce Campbell fan. I love the Evil Dead trilogy. So, if that's basic, I guess I'm basic.
I don't think that's basic.
Well, I actually remember reading Stephen King's review of Evil Dead in Twilight Zone magazine.
Yes.
And then I don't know how much later it was. I went to the drive-in with some friends one night, and we're goofing around, having fun at the drive-in, and all of a sudden I'm like, this is that movie that Stephen King was talking about.
Oh, cool.
So I got to see it on initial release at the drive-in, which I think is just a great experience.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm jealous.
And I got to see Evil Dead the musical performed in the woods.
Oh,
which was a lot of fun.
Idea. Cool.
And if we're sharing tattoos, I don't know if you'll be able to. Well, I have a Cthulhu tattoo on my arm with Aquaman and Cthulhu.
Cool.
But this one, we'll see if I can reposition myself.
Oh, I love it.
Oh,
that's cool.
It's unfinished, but the books.
I see Dracula.
The books are Dracula and Salem's Lot.
Oh, cool. I love it.
But I have to, even though the tattoo shop I go to is open, I'm still waiting to be on the safe side. And then this will be kind of sideways. There's
nice.
Cthulhu. We'll use the Aquaman a little. I don't know. It's all over. It's hard to get the right angle on this camera.
Yeah. We're looking forward to getting more tattoos as well. I don't know what will be next, but eventually.
Oh, I've been planning a number of other tattoos. I'm a huge comic book fan, and I want sort of I don't know what they call it, but a bunch of the Marvel Comics horror characters.
Oh, cool.
Together.
Awesome.
You call it when they're sort of just thrown in together. But
Neat.
like Man Thing, if you can see,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be cool.
I want a tattoo of Man Thing. Um,
That's the thing too. Like Meg was saying, in our free time, we love horror, we love romance, we love superhero things. It's like, don't put us into just a category. Like, you're
Yeah.
lots of things.
we're here to talk about horror.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
That's usually what we're here to talk about.
we love all the fandoms, and I think that it's just, I love that about people like us that we've discovered through writing these books is, oh, we're passionate about things that we love, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, whatever it is. But I miss cons because we used to
Oh
meet
yeah.
really cool people and just have chats about the shows and books and everything we love. So I look forward to those coming back someday.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm in Ohio, and there's a twice yearly convention called Cinema Wasteland.
Oh.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
It was so much fun, and it's nice and close. It's maybe half an hour away from where
Oh,
I'm at.
nice.
And I've met some wonderful people there. I think the last time I was there, I got to meet Jack Ketchum,
Oh,
which was fantastic. He was
yeah.
not happy with me because I asked him to autograph the skeleton cheerleader cover of The Girl Next Door.
Oh.
You're familiar with that,
Yes.
and he's not a fan of that cover.
He doesn't like that cover?
No,
I guess
and
I can see why.
I I have another copy of the book. I have the leisure copy, but I had to have that cover. And if I was going to
Yeah,
get
that was a
it,
good call.
it was going to be on that one. But yeah, and I've been to Horror Hound a few times. I really want to go to Scares That Care.
Yeah, I would like to do that too. I haven't been to that one.
It's a big one. And then what's the Killer Con? Speaking of, now I could be way out of line here. Is there a nomination of some sort? Or am I wrong?
There's an almost.
Oh, that's right. It's preliminary ballot, right?
Preliminary.
Yeah, preliminary ballot. The Science of Women in Horror is on the preliminary ballot. So that's really exciting. I posted the other day on Twitter. I said, like, I've been a published author for 7 years, and this is the first time I even made the preliminary ballot. So it's really exciting. So we're happy to be there.
Well, that's great. Obviously, Stephen King fans. What about Joe Hill?
Oh yes, I love Joe Hill. I think he brings. I say often he's a lot like his dad in his writing, but he brings even more emotion into his characters. And I found myself crying and like getting emotional more when I read Joe Hill. I absolutely love his fiction.
And you know why I think he's maybe, different, or maybe better in that way, is because he's half Tabitha.
There you go. He's bringing. Yes, I love that.
Have you checked out his comic books from DC? Not the Lock and Key.
No, I don't. I'm not. I actually have not read Lock and Key or any of his comic books. What do you? How do you feel about them?
Well, even though I have a complete box set of Lock and Key, I have not read them yet.
Okay.
Which I say about a lot of books. No,
That's all right.
I own it. Haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
But I just finished all of the books in the Hill House line from DC.
Uh-huh.
He wrote 2 of them. He wrote Basketful of Heads and Plunge, and then there were three or 4 others that he curated by different writers. Overall, they were all good enough to read. Different levels. I really liked Basketful of Heads, which was the one that kicked off the whole thing, and Joe Hill wrote that one. And Plunge, which was the last one, and he wrote that one, was a completely different kind of story, which was nice to see that he was mixing it up. The rest of it's nice to see there's sort of, I think, a resurgence of horror in comics right now.
Yeah,
that's great to hear.
Very cool.
That's one thing comics that I don't have a very good knowledge base on, but I love hearing that there's a resurgence in horror. That's awesome.
Excuse me. I keep losing. I really should take notes before I do these things. I don't like to fly by the seat.
We were talking about Comic Cons, and so I need to name drop quick because you're in Ohio, and Ohio is where I went to my first Wizard World con, and I met James Marsters, who plays Spike on Buffy. And that's literally like, I'm like, oh wait, Meg, we need to start going to cons because you can actually like hang out with these people.
My sister went to one of those and met James Marsters. I think they bought like the Eliza Dushku package,
Yeah.
and she canceled.
Oh no.
So it was switched to the James Marsters.
Oh, that's.
So they got to meet him. They had a great time. I've only actually been to one very small comic book convention.
Oh, okay.
For me, it's mainly been horror, and Cinema Wasteland is movies primarily, which is fine, but I would like to go to one more author driven.
Yeah.
But all right, so is there anything either of you want to talk about, plug anything at all?
I mean, I think we plugged hard. We talked about our books and our podcast and what else, Kelly? What are we missing?
I think we covered it all. I did a James Marsters shout out and
Yeah.
my job here.
Yeah. We've covered it all.
There's one of the other things I do is tabletop gaming.
Oh.
Love board games.
Like my husband's a Warhammer player. I don't know if you're into that.
I don't go quite that far, although
Okay.
the book I'm currently reading is by an author that's written dozens of Warhammer novels.
Yeah.
But there's a game called Unmatched, which is kind of a fighting game, not real complicated. It's card driven, and they're using different characters from different places. Like the first one was just, you could be King Arthur or Sinbad or Medusa or Alice in Wonderland. And then there's one, they came out with another one that had a weird matchup, although you can mix and match. It had Robin Hood and Bigfoot. There's a Jurassic Park, so you can be either InGen or the Raptors. One that I was very excited about it's the same game, but it's Cobble and Fog, where you have Dracula, the Invisible Man, Jekyll and Hyde, and Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, okay.
So you can be any of these.
Done.
Yeah.
But the reason I brought it up is because the most recent is Buffy.
Oh.
So you can be Buffy, or you can be Willow, or you can be Angel, or the one that I would play, Spike. I would absolutely be Spike.
That
But
sounds good. That's really smart of them.
We do a lot of gaming in both of our households, and so we currently have a game of Catan set out that we need to finish tonight. Dead of Winter, we play both of our households. What were you playing the other night, Meg, when you dragged your husband that he's bad at it?
Oh, he was actually playing that was a video game.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. But we played the Shining game. My son just said, I want to play it. We played the Shining game, and that was like a good level of like, it was like a little bit complicated, but not super complicated. So you want to come say hi? Tell them about the Shining game.
Yeah, there's this. We haven't done this new like mode thing. It's not like the actual Shining movie. There's a crazy person, which in the movie was the dad, and he's going around, and no one knows who you are. They have to figure out. And you have to find certain weapons in certain rooms, and I hear footsteps.
All right. We better go. All right. Bye.
So fun fact, her son is named after a fictional serial killer.
Yes,
Which
his name's
one?
Dexter. Yeah, I had to, because we named our first son Fox after Fox Mulder from the XFiles. And so we're like, oh, what are we going to name our second son? And we were watching Dexter at the time, and it just made sense. So there you go.
And to follow up, our first child is named Campbell after Bruce Campbell. So, we're on brand.
Well, are either of you familiar with deck building games?
I don't know. Like,
They're-
is that like Magic the Gathering?
No, they're different than Magic. Magic is a collectible card game.
Okay.
A deck building game, you buy the game, it has, let's say, 200 cards in it. And typically each player starts with the same deck of 10 cards, the same cards, and you're somehow purchasing new cards from the cards provided to make your deck better.
Okay.
And again, the reason I bring this up is because there's a system called, it's Legendary. The first one was Legendary Marvel, which is Marvel Comics characters. But they've branched out into a bunch, and two that I still have are XFiles and Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Cool. Amazing. Yes.
The X-Files one I love a lot because it's got photos from the show.
Cool.
I can't remember if the Buffy one has photos or artwork, but photos from the show, and you're playing through seasons of the show.
You should take pictures. I want to see the X-Files one. You should tweet me some pictures. That would be
okay.
really
I'll
cool
do that.
Because I don't think I've seen that before.
It's a lot of fun, and it's in the Legendary system. Normally, you're playing against the game. They're cooperative games.
That's
and
good.
When each player takes a turn, then the game takes a turn. And in the normal ones, like the Marvel, that means you draw a card from the villain deck and you put it face up in this row. But in the X-Files game, the cards go face down.
Oh.
So you don't know, and you have to earn, when you play your cards, they basically either give you fight points or recruiting points, and you have to get fight points to scan the card and flip it over and see what it is.
Whoa, cool.
And there's a deck of what they call the hero cards, which is going to be your Fox Mulder, Dana Scully, whoever else you can put in there. But you also have to put in like 5 or 6 bad guy cards that will pop up in your headquarters to mess up the game. And
Diana
you're trying
Fowley.
It's all leading up to a big bad that you're fighting at the end of the season. And
Very
there's
cool.
three clues that you have to solve. And for each one you don't solve, it's going to make fighting the big bad at the end harder.
Oh.
It's that's just the quickest of vague explanations, but it's a lot of fun. And I'll take some pictures of it and
I want to see
and
that.
tweet them.
Tag us both.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, now that I'm following you,
Kelly does exist.
I haven't been ghosting you. I promise.
all right. Well, speaking of following, where can people find you on social media so they can learn about everything you're doing?
I'm at Meg Hafdahl on Twitter, and I also have a website, meghafdahl.com, and I'm on Facebook, author Meg Hafdahl, and then also I'll let Kelly do all the horror rewind.
So I'm Kelly Florence on Twitter and Insta, and we are Horror Rewind on Insta and Twitter and Facebook. So we're all over the place.
It's great. All right. Well, I'm going to do my outro here and then stop the recording, and we can chat for a second when I'm done with that. So to all the people out there, if you have any comments or questions, put them in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you want to follow me on social media, I am at Ronan5757 on Twitter and Eric Smith 5757 on Instagram. That's Eric with a K, ERIKSMITH 5757. So that's it for the low budget interview show. I had to remember what show I was doing here. And until next time, read more books.
Bye.
Bye.